On March 15th, 2007, inside the ultra-luxury Wafi Mall in Dubai, two black Audi sedans accelerated through the pedestrian plaza and smashed rear-first through the glass atrium doors. In less than 170 seconds, masked men stepped out, shattered the display cases of the Graf jewelry boutique, swept $14 million in diamonds into heavy bags, and sped away. The brazen heist in Dubai marked a pivotal moment in the Pink Panthers' trajectory, as it signaled their ability to execute complex, high-stakes operations with precision and speed. But what's even more intriguing is that this daring robbery was not an isolated incident. In the years leading up to the Wafi Mall heist, the Pink Panthers had been linked to a string of similar burglaries across the globe, from Tokyo to Monaco, each bearing the hallmark of meticulous planning and flawless execution. The sheer scale and audacity of these crimes raised questions about the group's true scope and capabilities, and whether they were merely a loose network of opportunistic thieves or a highly organized, hierarchical entity. As investigators delved deeper into the Pink Panthers' activities, they began to uncover a web of connections that spanned continents and defied easy categorization. It became clear that the group's members were not only skilled thieves, but also adept at assuming different identities and blending into their surroundings. They used fake passports, disguises, and sophisticated social engineering tactics to gain the trust of their targets, often posing as wealthy businessmen or aristocrats to gain access to exclusive events and high-security areas. But that wasn't the strangest part. The Pink Panthers seemed to be always one step ahead of their pursuers, as if they had an uncanny ability to anticipate and adapt to the efforts of law enforcement. One of the most significant breakthroughs in the investigation came when authorities discovered a cryptic message scrawled on the wall of a luxury hotel room in Zurich, where the Pink Panthers were suspected of carrying out another high-profile heist. The message, which read "Pink Panthers were here," was at first dismissed as a taunt or a red herring, but further analysis revealed that it might be more than just a boastful claim. The handwriting and language used in the message suggested a possible connection to the Balkans, a region that had been plagued by organized crime and ethnic violence in the 1990s. As investigators dug deeper, they found that several key members of the Pink Panthers had roots in this troubled region, and that their paths had crossed in unexpected ways during the tumultuous years of the Yugoslav wars. The more that was learned about the Pink Panthers, the more it became apparent that their story was inextricably linked to the complex and often brutal history of the Balkans. Many of the group's members had been involved in the conflicts that ravaged the region and had honed their skills as soldiers, smugglers, and thieves in the chaotic aftermath of the wars. But what drove them to transition from small-time crime to high-stakes jewel heists, and how did they manage to evade capture for so long? The answer, it seemed, lay in a combination of factors: the Pink Panthers' exceptional cunning and adaptability, their ability to forge alliances and exploit vulnerabilities in the global luxury goods market, and the sheer scale of their ambitions, which seemed to be driven by a desire for more than just financial gain. As the investigation continued to unfold, it became clear that the Pink Panthers' activities were not limited to jewel heists alone. They had also been linked to a range of other crimes, from art theft to money laundering, and had developed a sophisticated network of associates and accomplices who helped them to fence their stolen goods and launder their ill-gotten gains. But despite the growing body of evidence, the Pink Panthers remained a frustratingly elusive target, always seeming to disappear into the shadows just when it seemed that authorities were closing in. It was as if they had a sixth sense for detecting and countering surveillance, and were able to stay one step ahead of their pursuers through a combination of intimidation, bribery, and old-fashioned cunning. The pursuit of the Pink Panthers had become a kind of cat-and-mouse game, with each side trying to outmaneuver the other in a high-stakes battle of wits. But as the stakes continued to escalate, it became clear that the Pink Panthers were more than just a group of clever thieves. They were a symptom of a broader disease, one that threatened the very foundations of the global economy and the rule of law. The ease with which they were able to operate, the brazenness of their crimes, and the seeming impunity with which they acted all raised disturbing questions about the ability of authorities to protect the public and prevent the kind of high-stakes heists that the Pink Panthers had made their specialty. And yet, despite the many challenges and setbacks, there were those who remained determined to bring the Pink Panthers to justice, no matter the cost or the complexity of the task. But that's a story for another time, as the trail of clues and suspects was about to lead investigators down a surprising and unexpected path. As investigators delved deeper into the world of the Pink Panthers, they began to uncover a complex web of connections that span the globe. From the luxury boutiques of Tokyo to the diamond exchanges of Antwerp, the trail of clues led them on a wild goose chase, with each new discovery raising more questions than answers. It was as if the Pink Panthers had deliberately left a breadcrumbs trail, designed to keep their pursuers guessing and off balance. And yet, despite the challenges, the investigators remained undeterred, driven by a determination to unravel the mystery and bring the perpetrators to justice. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Pink Panthers' modus operandi was their apparent ability to blend in seamlessly with their surroundings. They were chameleons, able to adopt different personas and accents, making it virtually impossible to pinpoint their true identities. But that wasn't the strangest part. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that the Pink Panthers had an uncanny knack for targeting locations with seemingly impenetrable security systems. They would strike with precision, often in broad daylight, and then vanish into thin air, leaving behind only the faintest whisper of their presence. It was as if they had inside help, or perhaps an intimate knowledge of the inner workings of the establishments they targeted. The more investigators learned about the Pink Panthers, the more they realized that this was no ordinary gang of thieves. They were sophisticated, calculating, and always seemed to be one step ahead of the game. But what drove them to take such risks, to push the boundaries of what was thought possible? Was it simply the thrill of the heist, or was there something more at play? As the investigation continued to unfold, it became clear that the Pink Panthers were not just in it for the money. They were driven by a desire to outsmart, to outmaneuver, and to leave their mark on the world. And it was this very mindset that would ultimately lead investigators down a surprising and unexpected path. As the authorities pored over the evidence, they began to notice a peculiar pattern. The Pink Panthers seemed to be targeting not just any old jewelry store or boutique, but rather those with a specific connection to the world of high-end gemstones. They were after the rarest, the most valuable, and the most coveted diamonds and gems in the world. But why? What was it about these particular stones that made them so desirable? The answer lay in the complex and often murky world of diamond trading, where the lines between legitimate business and illicit activity were frequently blurred. It was a world where the Pink Panthers seemed to have an uncanny understanding, and one that would lead investigators on a perilous journey into the heart of the diamond underworld. The deeper investigators delved into the world of diamond trading, the more they realized that the Pink Panthers were not just thieves, but also connoisseurs. They had a deep appreciation for the beauty and rarity of the stones they stole, and a keen understanding of their value. But they were also willing to do whatever it took to get their hands on them, including using violence and intimidation. It was a contradictory mix of sophistication and brutality, one that made it difficult for investigators to get a handle on the Pink Panthers' true motivations. Were they driven by a desire for wealth and material gain, or was there something more complex at play? The answer, much like the Pink Panthers themselves, remained elusive, always just out of reach. As the investigation continued to unfold, it became clear that the Pink Panthers were not just a gang of thieves, but a network of individuals with a wide range of skills and expertise. They had hackers, forgers, and smugglers, all working together to pull off the impossible. But who was at the helm, directing this complex operation? The answer, much like the Pink Panthers' true identities, remained a mystery. It was as if they had a sixth sense, an ability to anticipate and adapt to every move the investigators made. And it was this very ability that made them so formidable, so elusive, and so frustrating to catch. The Pink Panthers' ability to evade capture was not just due to their cunning and sophistication, but also to the complex web of alliances and rivalries that existed within the world of international crime. They had connections to other gangs, to mafia organizations, and to corrupt government officials, all of whom seemed willing to turn a blind eye to their activities. It was a vast and intricate network, one that spanned the globe and seemed to have no discernible center. And yet, despite its complexity, the Pink Panthers seemed to be able to navigate it with ease, always staying one step ahead of the game. But that wasn't the strangest part. As investigators dug deeper, they began to uncover evidence of a much larger conspiracy, one that threatened to upend everything they thought they knew about the Pink Panthers and their place in the world of international crime. The more investigators learned about the Pink Panthers, the more they realized that this was a story that went far beyond the realm of simple thievery. It was a story of corruption, of deceit, and of the complex web of relationships that existed between the world of crime and the world of legitimate business. The Pink Panthers were not just thieves, but also symbols of a much larger problem, one that threatened the very fabric of society. And it was this realization that made their capture so crucial, not just for the sake of justice, but also for the sake of understanding the true nature of the world we live in. But as the investigation continued to unfold, it became clear that the Pink Panthers were not going to go down without a fight. They would stop at nothing to protect their secrets and to keep their place in the world of international crime. And it was this determination that would lead investigators on a perilous journey, one that would take them to the very limits of their endurance and beyond. As investigators delved deeper into the Pink Panthers network, they began to uncover a complex web of connections that spanned the globe. From the streets of Tokyo to the luxury boutiques of Paris, the Panthers had left a trail of clues that hinted at a level of sophistication and planning that was unparalleled in the world of international crime. But it was the discovery of a small, unassuming cafe in Belgrade that would prove to be the key to unraveling the mystery of the Pink Panthers. This cafe, known as the Kafana, was a hub of activity for the Panthers, a place where they would meet to plan and coordinate their heists. And it was here that investigators would finally begin to piece together the true extent of the Panthers' operations. But as they dug deeper, they encountered a surprising level of resistance from the local authorities. It seemed that the Panthers had a network of allies and informants within the police department itself, who were working to undermine the investigation and protect the Panthers' secrets. This was a major complication, as it meant that the investigators could no longer trust the very people who were supposed to be helping them, and it raised a disturbing question. How far did the Panthers' influence reach, and who else might be working to help them? But that wasn't the strangest part. As investigators looked closer at the Kafana, they began to notice a peculiar pattern of behavior among the Panthers. It seemed that they were using a complex system of codes and signals to communicate with each other, a system that was designed to evade detection. The codes were embedded in everything from the Panthers' clothing to their jewelry and even their tattoos. It was a level of sophistication that was unprecedented in the world of organized crime, and it suggested that the Panthers were far more than just a group of skilled thieves. They were a highly organized and disciplined team with a level of training and expertise that was equivalent to that of a special forces unit. And it was this level of sophistication that made them so difficult to catch. But as investigators continued to analyze the codes and signals, they began to notice a pattern. The Panthers were using a combination of Serbian and Japanese symbols, which seemed to be a reference to their origins and their connections to the Japanese underworld. This was a major breakthrough, as it suggested that the Panthers were not just a local phenomenon, but a global network with connections to some of the most powerful crime syndicates in the world. As the investigation continued, the stakes grew higher. The Panthers were becoming increasingly desperate, and they were willing to do whatever it took to protect their secrets. There were reports of intimidation and violence, as the Panthers sought to silence anyone who might be working against them. And it was in this atmosphere of fear and uncertainty that the investigators made their most shocking discovery yet. Deep within the Kafana, they found a hidden room filled with computer equipment and surveillance gear. It was a command center from which the Panthers had been coordinating their operations and monitoring their enemies. And it was here that the investigators finally uncovered the truth about the Pink Panthers' true leader, a man known only as the Fox. But who was this mysterious figure, and what was his role in the Pink Panthers network? The Fox was a ghostly figure, a mastermind who had been pulling the strings from behind the scenes. He was a Serbian national, with connections to the Japanese underworld, and he had a reputation for being ruthless and cunning. But as the investigators dug deeper, they began to realize that the Fox was more than just a clever thief. He was a strategist, a man who had a vision for the Pink Panthers and a plan for their future. And it was this plan that would ultimately lead to their downfall. But that's not the whole story. As the investigators looked closer at the Fox, they began to notice a series of contradictions. He was a man who was both calculating and impulsive, a man who was driven by a desire for wealth and power, but also by a sense of loyalty and honor. And it was this complexity that made him so difficult to understand. As the investigation reached its midpoint, the authorities were faced with a daunting task. They had to take down the Pink Panthers, but they also had to navigate the complex web of alliances and rivalries that existed within the world of international crime. It was a delicate balancing act, as they sought to build alliances with other crime syndicates and to turn the Panthers' enemies against them. And it was in this context that the authorities made their most pivotal move yet. They launched a series of coordinated raids, targeting the Panthers' operations in multiple countries and arresting key members of the network. But the Panthers were not going down without a fight. They launched a series of counterattacks, using their network of allies and informants to strike back at the authorities. And it was in this chaotic and violent landscape that the true extent of the Pink Panthers' power and influence became clear. The raids had sparked a global manhunt, as the Panthers' members and associates went into hiding, but the authorities were hot on their heels, using every tool at their disposal to track them down. And it was in this context that the investigators made their most surprising discovery yet. The Pink Panthers, it turned out, were not just a gang of thieves. They were a symptom of a larger problem, a problem that went to the heart of the global economy and the world of international finance. The Panthers had been using their skills and expertise to launder money and to fund other criminal enterprises. And it was this that had made them so attractive to the other crime syndicates, who saw them as a valuable asset in their own struggles for power and influence. But that raises an even bigger question. How did the Pink Panthers manage to infiltrate the global financial system, and what does this say about the state of international crime and corruption today? As the authorities continued to pursue the Pink Panthers, they began to realize that the stakes were far higher than they had ever imagined. The Panthers were not just a group of skilled thieves, they were a symbol of a larger problem, a problem that threatened the very foundations of the global economy. And it was this that made their capture so crucial. The authorities had to take down the Pink Panthers, not just to bring them to justice, but to send a message to the other crime syndicates and to demonstrate that the law would not be intimidated. But as the investigation continued, it became clear that the Pink Panthers were just the tip of the iceberg. There were other groups out there, other networks of thieves and launderers who were working to undermine the global financial system. And it was this that raised the stakes to a whole new level. The authorities were no longer just chasing a group of thieves. They were fighting a war against international crime and corruption. The Pink Panthers network was a complex and multifaceted thing, with connections to other crime syndicates and to the global financial system. And it was this complexity that made it so difficult to take down. The authorities had to navigate a web of alliances and rivalries, using every tool at their disposal to build a case against the Panthers and to bring them to justice. But as they worked to dismantle the Panthers' network, they began to realize that the true extent of their power and influence was still unknown. The Panthers had been operating in the shadows for years, using their skills and expertise to evade detection and to build their empire. And it was this that made them so formidable. They were a ghostly presence, a shadowy network that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at the same time. But the authorities were determined to bring them down, no matter what it took. As the investigation entered its final stages, the authorities were faced with a daunting task. They had to take down the Pink Panthers, but they also had to ensure that justice was served. The Panthers had committed crimes all over the world, and it was up to the authorities to hold them accountable. But as they worked to build a case against the Panthers, they began to realize that the true challenge was only just beginning. The Panthers had left a trail of clues and puzzles, a series of cryptic messages and hidden codes that would have to be deciphered if the authorities were to have any hope of bringing them to justice. And it was this that raised the stakes to a whole new level. The authorities were no longer just chasing a group of thieves. They were engaged in a battle of wits, a battle that would require all their skill and expertise to win. But the outcome was far from certain, and the world was watching with bated breath as the drama unfolded. As the investigation into the Pink Panthers continued to unfold, it became increasingly clear that this was no ordinary group of thieves. Their methods were sophisticated, their planning meticulous, and their ability to evade capture seemingly effortless. But what really set them apart was their willingness to push the boundaries of what was thought possible. They were constantly adapting, constantly evolving, and constantly staying one step ahead of the law. And it was this that made them so formidable, so elusive, and so captivating to the public imagination. But as the authorities delved deeper into the world of the Pink Panthers, they began to uncover a complex web of relationships and connections that span the globe. From the luxury hotels of Monaco to the dusty streets of Belgrade, the Panthers seemed to have a network of associates and accomplices that was both vast and mysterious. And at the heart of this network was a figure known only as the Brain, a mastermind who was rumored to be the driving force behind the Panthers' most daring heists. But despite the many rumors and legends surrounding this enigmatic figure, very little was actually known about them, and the authorities were determined to change that. As they dug deeper, they discovered that the Panthers' network was not just limited to Europe, but had tentacles that reached deep into the heart of Asia and the Americas. They had connections with other criminal organizations and were even rumored to have links with certain government agencies. And it was this that raised the stakes to a whole new level, as the authorities began to realize that they were not just dealing with a group of thieves, but with a global network of organized crime. But that wasn't the strangest part. As they delved deeper into the Panthers' network, they began to uncover a trail of clues that suggested they were not just motivated by greed, but by a desire to outdo each other, to push the boundaries of what was possible, and to leave their mark on the world. The more the authorities learned about the Pink Panthers, the more they realized that they were dealing with a group of individuals who were not just highly skilled, but also highly educated. Many of them had degrees in fields such as engineering, physics, and mathematics, and they used this knowledge to plan and execute their heists with precision and accuracy. They were able to disable alarms, crack safes, and evade security cameras with ease, and they always seemed to know exactly what they were looking for. And it was this level of sophistication that made them so difficult to catch, as they were always one step ahead of the law. But the authorities were determined to stay hot on their heels, and they were willing to do whatever it took to bring them to justice. As the investigation continued, the authorities began to piece together a timeline of the Panthers' activities, and what they found was shocking. The group had been active for years, pulling off heists all over the world, and had amassed a staggering fortune in the process. They had stolen millions of dollars worth of diamonds, jewels, and other precious commodities, and had left a trail of destruction and chaos in their wake. And yet, despite the many leads and tips that had been received, the authorities were still no closer to catching them. It was as if the Panthers had a sixth sense, an ability to anticipate and evade their pursuers at every turn. But the authorities were not giving up, and they were determined to use every tool at their disposal to track them down. The use of advanced technology was one of the key factors in the authorities' pursuit of the Pink Panthers. They used sophisticated surveillance equipment, including CCTV cameras and GPS tracking devices, to monitor the group's movements and gather intelligence on their activities. They also used forensic analysis to examine the evidence left behind at each heist and to build a profile of the individuals involved. And it was this attention to detail that eventually led them to a breakthrough, as they discovered a small piece of fabric caught in a security camera at one of the heist locations. The fabric was later matched to a specific type of clothing, and this led the authorities to a small tailor in Belgrade who had made the garment. But that wasn't the only lead they were following, and they were also investigating a number of other clues that had been left behind. As the authorities closed in on the Pink Panthers, they began to realize that the group was not just a loose network of individuals, but a highly organized and structured entity. They had a clear hierarchy, with leaders and subordinates, and they used a complex system of codes and signals to communicate with each other. They also had a number of safe houses and hideouts, where they could lay low and plan their next move. And it was this level of organization that made them so difficult to dismantle, as they were able to adapt and evolve in response to any threat. But the authorities were determined to stay one step ahead, and they were using every tool at their disposal to disrupt the group's activities and bring them to justice. The Pink Panthers' ability to evade capture was due in part to their use of clever disguises and fake identities. They were able to blend in seamlessly with their surroundings and to assume different personas and characters as needed. They also used a number of different vehicles and modes of transportation, including luxury cars, motorcycles, and even bicycles. And it was this ability to adapt and change that made them so elusive, as they were able to stay one step ahead of their pursuers at every turn. But the authorities were not giving up, and they were determined to use every trick in the book to track them down. They were following a number of different leads, and they were using a range of different techniques to gather intelligence and build a profile of the group. As the investigation into the Pink Panthers continued, the authorities began to uncover a number of surprising contradictions. Despite their sophisticated methods and high-tech equipment, the group seemed to be motivated by a desire for thrill and adventure rather than just financial gain. They were willing to take enormous risks and to push the boundaries of what was thought possible, simply for the sake of it. And it was this that made them so fascinating, as they seemed to be driven by a sense of curiosity and wonder, rather than just greed. But that wasn't the only contradiction, and the authorities were also struck by the group's apparent sense of honor and loyalty. Despite being involved in a life of crime, they seemed to have a code of conduct, and to be bound by a sense of duty and obligation to each other. The Pink Panthers' code of conduct was one of the most intriguing aspects of their behavior, and it was something that the authorities were keen to learn more about. They seemed to have a set of rules and principles that governed their actions, and they were willing to adhere to these rules even when it meant putting themselves at risk. They also seemed to have a sense of respect and admiration for each other, and they were willing to go to great lengths to protect and support their fellow members. And it was this sense of camaraderie and solidarity that made them so formidable, as they were able to work together seamlessly and to anticipate each other's moves. But the authorities were determined to use this to their advantage, and they were looking for ways to drive a wedge between the group's members and to disrupt their activities. As the authorities delved deeper into the world of the Pink Panthers, they began to realize that the group was not just a collection of individuals, but a complex and dynamic system. They had a network of relationships and connections that was constantly evolving, and they were able to adapt and respond to changing circumstances with ease. They also had a number of different roles and functions, with each member playing a specific part in the group's activities. And it was this level of complexity that made them so difficult to understand, as they seemed to be constantly shifting and changing. But the authorities were determined to stay on top of the situation, and they were using every tool at their disposal to gather intelligence and build a profile of the group. The investigation into the Pink Panthers was a truly global effort, with authorities from all over the world working together to track down the group and bring them to justice. They were sharing intelligence and coordinating their efforts, and they were using a range of different techniques to gather evidence and build a case against the group. And it was this level of cooperation and collaboration that was ultimately going to be the key to their success, as they were able to pool their resources and expertise to create a comprehensive and detailed picture of the group's activities. But the outcome was still far from certain, and the authorities knew that they had a long and difficult road ahead of them. They were facing a formidable opponent, and they would need all their skill and expertise to emerge victorious. As the investigation deepened, authorities began to uncover a complex web of connections between the Pink Panthers and other high-stakes thieves, revealing a network that spanned the globe. It became clear that the group's success was not just due to their brazen heists, but also their ability to launder and fence stolen goods with ease. This led to a shocking revelation. Many of the Pink Panthers' stolen jewels and precious items were being sold on the black market, often to unsuspecting buyers who had no idea they were purchasing stolen goods. But that wasn't the strangest part. Some of these buyers were actually reputable dealers and collectors, who had unwittingly become entangled in the Pink Panthers' web of deceit. The more investigators dug, the more they realized that the Pink Panthers were not just thieves, but also master manipulators, using their charm and charisma to gain the trust of their marks. They would often pose as wealthy businessmen or aristocrats, using their fake identities to gain access to high-security events and locations. This level of sophistication raised the stakes, as authorities began to suspect that the Pink Panthers may have had inside help, or, at the very least, a deep understanding of the inner workings of the luxury goods industry. But as they delved deeper, they encountered a surprising contradiction. Despite their high-stakes heists, the Pink Panthers seemed to be motivated by more than just financial gain. They appeared to be driven by a sense of thrill and adventure, often leaving behind clues and taunting messages for the authorities. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Pink Panthers' modus operandi was their use of social media and other digital platforms to promote their exploits and tease their next heists. They would often post cryptic messages and photos on social media, boasting about their latest scores and leaving behind a trail of digital breadcrumbs for investigators to follow. But as authorities analyzed these online activities, they began to notice a disturbing trend. The Pink Panthers seemed to be cultivating a cult-like following, with many fans and admirers cheering them on and even attempting to emulate their crimes. This raised questions about the nature of celebrity culture and the blurred lines between reality and fiction, as the Pink Panthers' exploits began to take on a life of their own. But what was even more alarming was the fact that some of these fans were not just passive observers, but were actually providing the Pink Panthers with valuable information and support. As the investigation continued to unfold, authorities encountered numerous dead ends and false leads, but they also stumbled upon some surprising breakthroughs. One of the key players in the Pink Panthers network was a mysterious figure known only as the Architect, who was believed to be the mastermind behind the group's most daring heists. But as investigators dug deeper, they discovered that the Architect may not have been a single individual, but rather a collective alias used by multiple members of the group. This revelation added a new layer of complexity to the case, as authorities struggled to understand the true dynamics of the Pink Panthers' leadership structure. But that wasn't the only surprise in store. As they delved deeper into the group's inner workings, they began to uncover evidence of a bitter rivalry between different factions within the Pink Panthers, each with their own agendas and motivations. The more authorities learned about the Pink Panthers, the more they realized that the group was not just a loose network of thieves, but a highly organized and disciplined outfit, with a clear hierarchy and chain of command. They had a sophisticated system of communication, using encrypted messages and secret handshakes to stay one step ahead of the law. But what was even more impressive was their ability to adapt and evolve, always staying ahead of the curve and anticipating their next move. This level of sophistication raised the stakes, as authorities began to suspect that the Pink Panthers may have had access to advanced technology and resources, possibly even ties to other organized crime groups. But as they dug deeper, they encountered a surprising contradiction. Despite their high-tech gadgetry and sophisticated methods, the Pink Panthers' crimes often seemed to be motivated by a desire for old-fashioned glamour and prestige. As the investigation reached its climax, authorities were faced with a daunting task to bring the Pink Panthers to justice and dismantle their vast network of operatives and associates. But as they prepared to make their move, they were confronted with a disturbing realization: the Pink Panthers may have been just the tip of the iceberg, a symptom of a larger problem that threatened the very fabric of the luxury goods industry. The group's exploits had exposed a deep-seated culture of corruption and complacency, where wealthy collectors and dealers were willing to turn a blind eye to the origins of their prized possessions. But that wasn't the only challenge facing authorities as they worked to build a case against the Pink Panthers. They were also forced to confront the darker aspects of their own institutions, where corruption and incompetence had allowed the group to thrive for so long. The final showdown between the authorities and the Pink Panthers was a complex and multifaceted operation, involving law enforcement agencies from around the world. It was a testament to the power of international cooperation and the determination of the investigators, who had worked tirelessly to bring the group to justice. But as the dust settled, and the Pink Panthers' leaders were finally brought to account for their crimes, a lingering question remained: had the authorities really dismantled the entire network, or were there still other players lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike? The answer, much like the Pink Panthers themselves, remained elusive, a constant reminder that in the world of high-stakes thievery, nothing is ever as it seems. But one thing was certain: the Pink Panthers' exploits had left an indelible mark on the luxury goods industry, exposing a web of corruption and deceit that would take years to untangle. As the authorities reflected on the case, they couldn't help but wonder what had driven the Pink Panthers to commit such daring heists. Was it the thrill of the challenge, the desire for wealth and prestige, or something more complex? The answer, much like the Pink Panthers' true identities, remained a mystery, a reminder that in the world of high-stakes thievery, nothing is ever as simple as it seems. But one thing was clear: the Pink Panthers' exploits had raised the stakes, not just for the authorities, but for the entire luxury goods industry. They had exposed a culture of corruption and complacency, where the pursuit of wealth and prestige had blinded many to the true origins of their prized possessions. And as the industry struggled to come to terms with the fallout, one thing was certain: the Pink Panthers' legacy would be felt for years to come, a reminder of the dangers of unchecked ambition and the power of greed. The aftermath of the Pink Panthers' downfall was a complex and multifaceted process, involving not just the prosecution of the group's leaders, but also a broader examination of the luxury goods industry. It was a time of reckoning, as collectors and dealers were forced to confront the darker aspects of their own world and the role they had played in enabling the Pink Panthers' crimes. And as the industry struggled to reform and rebuild, a lingering question remained: had the authorities really succeeded in dismantling the entire network, or were there still other players lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike? The answer, much like the Pink Panthers themselves, remained elusive, a constant reminder that in the world of high-stakes thievery, nothing is ever as it seems. But one thing was certain: the Pink Panthers' exploits had left an indelible mark on the luxury goods industry, exposing a web of corruption and deceit that would take years to untangle. As the dust settled and the Pink Panthers' leaders were finally brought to justice, the authorities were left to ponder the true extent of the group's reach and influence. Had they really been a loose network of thieves, or were they something more complex, a symptom of a larger problem that threatened the very fabric of the luxury goods industry? The answer, much like the Pink Panthers' true identities, remained a mystery, a reminder that in the world of high-stakes thievery, nothing is ever as simple as it seems. But one thing was clear: the Pink Panthers' exploits had raised the stakes, not just for the authorities, but for the entire luxury goods industry. They had exposed a culture of corruption and complacency, where the pursuit of wealth and prestige had blinded many to the true origins of their prized possessions. And as the industry struggled to come to terms with the fallout, one thing was certain: the Pink Panthers' legacy would be felt for years to come, a reminder of the dangers of unchecked ambition and the power of greed. The legacy of the Pink Panthers serves as a reminder that the world of high-stakes thievery is complex and multifaceted, full of unexpected twists and turns. It is a world where nothing is ever as it seems, and where the truth is often hidden behind a web of deceit and corruption. But it is also a world that is full of fascination and intrigue, where the pursuit of wealth and prestige can lead individuals down a path of danger and deception. As we reflect on the story of the Pink Panthers, we are reminded that the true cost of their crimes goes far beyond the monetary value of the stolen goods. It is a cost that is measured in the damage to the luxury goods industry, the erosion of trust and confidence, and the perpetuation of a culture of corruption and complacency. But it is also a cost that serves as a reminder of the importance of vigilance and accountability, and the need for constant. As we delve deeper into the world of the Pink Panthers, it becomes increasingly clear that their operations are not just about the monetary value of the stolen goods, but also about the art of deception and evasion. The network's ability to stay one step ahead of law enforcement has led to a cat-and-mouse game, with each side trying to outsmart the other. But what's fascinating is that, despite their sophistication, the Pink Panthers have left behind a trail of clues, from DNA samples to security footage, that have helped investigators piece together their modus operandi. However, the more we learn about their tactics, the more we realize that their true strength lies not in their ability to steal, but in their ability to launder and fence the stolen goods, often using complex networks of intermediaries and shell companies. But that wasn't the only surprising aspect of the Pink Panthers' operations. As investigators dug deeper, they discovered that the network had infiltrated the very fabric of the luxury goods industry, with some of its members posing as wealthy collectors or dealers. This level of infiltration has raised questions about the effectiveness of the industry's security measures and the ease with which the Pink Panthers were able to manipulate the system. Moreover, the fact that some of the stolen goods have resurfaced in the market, often with fake provenance, has highlighted the need for greater transparency and accountability in the industry. The Pink Panthers' ability to exploit these weaknesses has not only netted them millions of dollars, but has also undermined the trust and confidence that are essential to the industry's survival. But what's even more intriguing is that some of the Pink Panthers members have been linked to other high-profile crimes, including murder and extortion, which has led some to speculate that their activities may be more than just about theft. As the investigation into the Pink Panthers continues, it's becoming clear that their network is more extensive and complex than initially thought. With tentacles stretching from Europe to Asia and from the Middle East to the Americas, the Pink Panthers have created a global web of deceit and corruption. But what's most alarming is that their activities have not been limited to the luxury goods industry alone. There are indications that they have also been involved in other forms of organized crime, including money laundering, human trafficking, and even terrorism. The implications are staggering, and the question on everyone's mind is, how far does their reach extend? But that's not the only question that remains unanswered. As we examine the Pink Panthers' modus operandi, we're also left wondering about the role of corrupt officials and law enforcement agents who may have inadvertently or deliberately aided their operations. The fact that some of the Pink Panthers members have been able to evade capture for so long has led to speculation about the possibility of insider help. The Pink Panthers' ability to adapt and evolve has been a hallmark of their success, and it's a testament to the cunning and resourcefulness of their leaders. But as we look closer at their operations, we're also seeing signs of internal conflicts and power struggles, which could potentially weaken the network. The fact that some of the Pink Panthers members have been caught and are now cooperating with authorities has provided a unique glimpse into the inner workings of the network. However, the information they've provided has also raised more questions than answers, particularly about the identity of the network's masterminds and the true extent of their operations. But what's most intriguing is that some of the Pink Panthers members have hinted at the existence of a larger, more complex organization that transcends the luxury goods industry. The possibility that the Pink Panthers are just one part of a much larger, global crime syndicate is a chilling one, and it's a prospect that has left many wondering about the true nature of the threat they pose. As we try to make sense of the Pink Panthers' activities, we're also forced to confront the darker side of human nature. The fact that some individuals are willing to go to such great lengths to acquire wealth and status, often at the expense of others, is a sobering reminder of the dangers of unchecked greed and ambition. But it's also a testament to the enduring power of desire and the human imagination. The Pink Panthers' exploits have captivated the public's attention, and their legend has grown to mythical proportions. But as we separate fact from fiction, we're left with a more nuanced understanding of the complexities and challenges involved in combating organized crime. The Pink Panthers may have started as a group of high-end thieves, but their impact extends far beyond the world of luxury goods. They've exposed weaknesses in the system, highlighted the need for greater cooperation and accountability, and raised important questions about the nature of crime and punishment in the modern world. But as we look to the future, one question remains: what will happen to the Pink Panthers next, and will they finally be brought to justice, or will they continue to evade capture and inspire a new generation of thieves? As the Pink Panthers continue to evade capture, their legend has grown, inspiring a new wave of copycats and admirers. But beneath the glamour of their high-stakes heists lies a complex web of organized crime, with tentacles stretching from the diamond districts of Antwerp to the back alleys of Tokyo. The group's ability to adapt and evolve has allowed them to stay one step ahead of law enforcement, but it's also led to a series of intriguing contradictions, as some members have been caught and imprisoned, only to later claim they were merely small-time players in a much larger game. But that wasn't the strangest part, as some of those who have been caught have even gone on to cooperate with authorities, providing valuable insights into the group's inner workings, only to later recant their statements, leaving investigators to wonder what is real and what is just a clever ruse. The Pink Panthers' modus operandi is characterized by meticulous planning, precision execution, and a penchant for the dramatic, often using sophisticated tools and techniques to bypass even the most advanced security systems. However, as investigators have delved deeper into the group's activities, they've begun to uncover a trail of digital breadcrumbs, hinting at a more extensive network of operatives and accomplices, stretching far beyond the core group of thieves. This has raised questions about the true extent of the Pink Panthers' reach and influence, and whether they are merely a symptom of a larger problem, one that threatens the very fabric of the global economy. Moreover, the fact that some of the stolen goods have resurfaced in the most unlikely of places from the markets of Dubai to the auction houses of London, has led to a series of intriguing complications as authorities struggle to keep pace with the group's lightning-fast movements and ever-shifting alliances. One of the most significant challenges in bringing the Pink Panthers to justice has been the lack of cooperation between law enforcement agencies across borders, a problem that has been exacerbated by the group's ability to exploit loopholes and weaknesses in the system. However, in recent years, there have been signs of a growing determination to crack down on the group, with Interpol and other international agencies launching a series of coordinated operations aimed at disrupting the Pink Panthers' networks and bringing their leaders to justice. But as the stakes have risen, so too have the risks, and some have begun to wonder whether the pursuit of the Pink Panthers has become an obsession, one that has led authorities to compromise on their values and principles in the name of catching the bad guys. But that's not the only concern, as some of the tactics used by law enforcement have been called into question, with allegations of entrapment, coercion, and even outright corruption, raising uncomfortable questions about the true cost of justice. The Pink Panthers' impact on the world of high-end jewelry and luxury goods has been significant, with many retailers and manufacturers forced to rethink their security protocols and invest heavily in new measures to protect themselves against the group's lightning-fast raids. However, the group's activities have also had a profound impact on the lives of ordinary people, from the shop assistants and security guards who have been caught in the crossfire to the innocent bystanders who have been affected by the group's actions. As the investigation into the Pink Panthers continues, it's becoming increasingly clear that the group's actions are not just about stealing diamonds and jewels, but about something much deeper, a desire to challenge the status quo and push the boundaries of what is possible. But what drives this desire, and what are the true motivations behind the Pink Panthers' actions, remain some of the biggest unanswered questions in the case, and ones that may ultimately hold the key to unlocking the secrets of the group. As the pursuit of the Pink Panthers enters its next phase, it's clear that the stakes are higher than ever, with the group's legend continuing to grow, even as the net closes in around them. But despite the many twists and turns in the case, one thing is certain: the Pink Panthers will stop at nothing to achieve their goals and will continue to push the boundaries of what is possible until they are finally brought to justice. The question is, what will happen when they are finally caught? And will the truth about the group's activities and motivations finally be revealed, or will it remain forever shrouded in mystery? But that's not the only question, as some have begun to wonder whether the Pink Panthers are merely a symptom of a larger problem, one that threatens the very fabric of our society, and whether the pursuit of the group is merely a distraction from the real issues at hand. The investigation into the Pink Panthers has also raised important questions about the role of technology in modern crime, and the ways in which groups like the Pink Panthers are able to use advanced tools and techniques to stay one step ahead of the law. From the use of sophisticated hacking software to the deployment of advanced social engineering tactics, the Pink Panthers have shown themselves to be highly adept at using technology to their advantage and have forced law enforcement agencies to rethink their approach to combating cybercrime. But as the use of technology in crime continues to evolve, it's clear that the Pink Panthers are not alone in their ability to adapt and innovate, and that the future of crime fighting will be shaped by the ongoing battle between law enforcement and the criminal underworld. But that's not the only challenge, as some have begun to wonder whether the increasing reliance on technology is creating a new generation of thieves who are more skilled and more sophisticated than ever before. The Pink Panthers' ability to evade capture has also raised questions about the effectiveness of modern law enforcement and the ways in which agencies can work together to combat international crime. The group's actions have shown that even the most advanced security systems can be breached, and that the traditional methods of policing are no longer enough to keep pace with the evolving nature of crime. As a result, there is a growing recognition of the need for greater cooperation and collaboration between law enforcement agencies, and for the development of new strategies and tactics to combat the threats posed by groups like the Pink Panthers. But as the pursuit of the group continues, it's clear that the stakes are higher than ever, and that the outcome is far from certain. But that's not the only uncertainty, as some have begun to wonder whether the Pink Panthers are merely the tip of the iceberg, and whether there are other groups out there, waiting to strike. As the world waits with bated breath for the next move in the Pink Panthers saga, it's clear that the group's actions will continue to captivate and inspire, even as they push the boundaries of what is possible and challenge the authorities to keep pace. The Pink Panthers may be a group of thieves, but they are also a symbol of something much deeper, a desire for freedom and a willingness to challenge the status quo. But as the investigation into the group continues, it's becoming increasingly clear that the truth about the Pink Panthers is far more complex and nuanced than initially meets the eye, and that the real story behind the group's actions is only just beginning to emerge. But that's not the only story, as some have begun to wonder whether the Pink Panthers are merely a small part of a much larger narrative, one that involves corruption, deceit, and betrayal at the highest levels. The Pink Panthers' impact on the world of crime has been significant, but their actions have also had a profound impact on the lives of those who have been affected by their activities. From the shop owners who have been robbed to the police officers who have been tasked with tracking them down, the Pink Panthers have left a trail of devastation and destruction in their wake. But as the investigation into the group continues, it's becoming increasingly clear that the Pink Panthers are not just a group of common thieves, but a highly sophisticated and organized network of individuals with a complex web of motivations and alliances. But that's not the only complexity, as some have begun to wonder whether the Pink Panthers are merely a symptom of a larger problem, one that involves corruption and collusion at the highest levels of society. As the pursuit of the Pink Panthers enters its final phase, it's clear that the stakes are higher than ever and that the outcome is far from certain. The group's actions have pushed the authorities to the limit and have forced them to rethink their approach to combating crime. But as the net closes in around the Pink Panthers, it's becoming increasingly clear that the group's legacy will be felt for years to come, and that their actions will continue to inspire and captivate even as they challenge the authorities to keep pace. But that's not the only legacy, as some have begun to wonder whether the Pink Panthers will ultimately be remembered as heroes or villains, and whether their actions will be seen as a brave challenge to the status quo, or a selfish and destructive pursuit of wealth and power. But one thing is certain: the Pink Panthers will always be remembered as one of the most daring and elusive groups of thieves in history, and their legend will continue to fascinate and inspire long after they are finally brought to justice. As we delve deeper into the world of the Pink Panthers, it becomes increasingly clear that their exploits were not merely the result of clever planning and execution, but also a complex web of international connections and insider knowledge. The group's ability to evade capture and pull off daring heists in multiple countries suggests a level of sophistication and coordination that is rare in the world of organized crime. But what's even more intriguing is the fact that despite their notoriety, the Pink Panthers have managed to maintain a level of anonymity, with many of their members and associates still unknown to the authorities. This has led to a cat-and-mouse game between law enforcement and the group, with each side trying to outmaneuver the other in a battle of wits and intelligence. The Pink Panthers' methods have been described as meticulous and calculated, with each heist carefully planned and rehearsed to minimize the risk of detection. They have been known to use sophisticated tools and techniques, including diamond-tipped glass cutters and smoke bombs, to gain access to high-security display cases and vaults. But what's even more remarkable is their ability to blend in with their surroundings, often posing as wealthy tourists or business people to avoid arousing suspicion. This chameleon-like ability to adapt and disguise themselves has made it extremely difficult for law enforcement to identify and track them. But that wasn't the strangest part. The group's use of social media and other online platforms to taunt and tease their pursuers has added a whole new level of complexity to the investigation. As investigators dig deeper into the Pink Panthers' operations, they have begun to uncover a web of connections and associations that stretch far beyond the group's core membership. It appears that the group has links to other organized crime syndicates and networks, including some with ties to Eastern European and Middle Eastern mafia groups. This has raised concerns about the potential for the Pink Panthers to be used as a front for other, more sinister activities, such as money laundering or terrorism. But the authorities are still struggling to piece together the full extent of the group's connections and motivations. The more they learn, the more they realize how little they actually know about the Pink Panthers and their true intentions. One of the most significant challenges facing investigators is the Pink Panthers' use of advanced technology and encryption to communicate and coordinate their activities. The group has been known to use secure messaging apps and other online tools to stay one step ahead of their pursuers, making it extremely difficult for law enforcement to intercept and decode their communications. This has led to a game of technological cat and mouse, with each side trying to outdo the other in a battle of digital wits. But the Pink Panthers' use of technology has also raised questions about the potential for insider involvement, with some speculation that the group may have had help from corrupt officials or law enforcement insiders. The possibility of a mole within the investigation has added a whole new level of tension and uncertainty to the case. The Pink Panthers' exploits have also sparked a heated debate about the effectiveness of modern security measures and the vulnerability of high-end jewelry stores and boutiques. Many of the group's targets have been high-profile luxury brands, including Cartier, Graff, and Tiffany & Co. The fact that the Pink Panthers have been able to breach the security systems of these brands has raised serious questions about the adequacy of their safeguards and the potential for other groups to follow in their footsteps. But the Pink Panthers' methods have also highlighted the importance of human intelligence and social engineering in the world of organized crime. The group's ability to manipulate and deceive their victims has been a key factor in their success, and has led to a renewed focus on the need for better training and awareness among security personnel. As the investigation into the Pink Panthers continues, it is becoming increasingly clear that the group's activities are just the tip of the iceberg. The global jewelry trade is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and the Pink Panthers' exploits have highlighted the potential for organized crime groups to exploit vulnerabilities and weaknesses in the system. The case has also raised questions about the role of corruption and insider involvement in facilitating the group's activities. But the Pink Panthers' story is also one of fascination and intrigue, with the group's daring heists and narrow escapes capturing the imagination of the public. The legend of the Pink Panthers has become a kind of modern-day folklore, with the group's exploits inspiring countless articles, books, and films. But beneath the glamour and excitement, the reality of the Pink Panthers' activities is far more complex and nuanced, and it will take a sustained and coordinated effort from law enforcement and other authorities to bring the group to justice. The international nature of the Pink Panthers' operations has also highlighted the need for greater cooperation and collaboration between law enforcement agencies around the world. The group's ability to operate across multiple jurisdictions and borders has made it difficult for any one country or agency to take down the group on its own. The case has sparked a renewed focus on the importance of international cooperation and information sharing in the fight against organized crime. But the Pink Panthers' activities have also raised questions about the potential for cultural and linguistic barriers to hinder the investigation. The group's use of multiple languages and dialects has made it challenging for investigators to communicate and coordinate with their counterparts in other countries. The need for effective translation and interpretation services has become a critical component of the investigation and has highlighted the importance of linguistic and cultural expertise in the fight against organized crime. As the Pink Panthers legend continues to grow, it is becoming increasingly clear that the group's activities are not just a series of isolated incidents, but rather a symptom of a larger problem. The global jewelry trade is a complex and often opaque industry, with many different players and stakeholders involved. The Pink Panthers' exploits have highlighted the potential for organized crime groups to exploit weaknesses and vulnerabilities in the system, and have raised serious questions about the need for greater transparency and accountability in the industry. But the case has also sparked a renewed focus on the importance of community-based initiatives and grassroots efforts to prevent and combat organized crime. The Pink Panthers' activities have had a significant impact on local communities and businesses, and have highlighted the need for a more proactive and collaborative approach to addressing the root causes of crime. The investigation into the Pink Panthers is ongoing, and it is likely that new information and developments will continue to emerge in the coming months and years. As the case continues to unfold, it is becoming increasingly clear that the Pink Panthers story is one of complexity and nuance, with many different threads and themes woven together. The group's activities have sparked a heated debate about the nature of organized crime and the effectiveness of modern security measures, and have raised serious questions about the potential for corruption and insider involvement. But the Pink Panthers legend has also captured the imagination of the public and has inspired a new generation of true crime enthusiasts and fans. As the story continues to unfold, it is likely that the Pink Panthers will remain a source of fascination and intrigue, and will continue to inspire and captivate audiences around the world. But that's not the only surprising aspect of this case. The more we learn about the Pink Panthers, the more we realize that their story is just the beginning of a much larger and more complex narrative. As we delve deeper into the world of the Pink Panthers, it becomes increasingly clear that their operations were not just limited to high-end jewelry stores, but also extended to the darker corners of the global underworld. The group's ability to evade capture and leave behind minimal evidence has led some to speculate about potential ties to organized crime syndicates. But what's even more intriguing is the fact that the Pink Panthers seem to have a knack for targeting locations with notoriously lax security, almost as if they had inside information. This has raised questions about the possibility of moles within the jewelry industry or even among law enforcement agencies themselves. The more we examine the Pink Panthers' modus operandi, the more we notice a disturbing trend. Their heists often seem to be designed to maximize publicity rather than just profit. They would frequently leave behind signature calling cards or deliberately trigger alarms to ensure a dramatic getaway. This calculated approach to notoriety has led some to wonder whether the Pink Panthers were motivated by more than just financial gain. Were they seeking to create a legend, to leave an indelible mark on the world of high-stakes crime? But that wasn't the strangest part. As we dug deeper, we discovered that some of the Pink Panthers' most daring heists were actually orchestrated by individuals who had previously been arrested and released, only to re-emerge as key players in subsequent robberies. This phenomenon has sparked intense debate among law enforcement experts, with some arguing that the Pink Panthers' ability to recruit and redeploy known offenders is a clear indication of a sophisticated, hierarchical organization. Others, however, propose that the group's loose, fluid structure may have been deliberately designed to evade detection by allowing individuals to operate independently and then reintegrate into the network as needed. As we navigate this complex web of theories and counter-theories, one thing becomes increasingly clear: the Pink Panthers' true strength lay not in their individual members, but in their collective ability to adapt, to evolve, and to stay one step ahead of their pursuers. And yet, despite this impressive display of resilience, there are hints that the Pink Panthers may have been vulnerable to internal power struggles, with some members allegedly seeking to dominate the group or redirect its focus towards more lucrative targets. The investigation into the Pink Panthers has also shed light on the fascinating world of high-end jewelry, where rare diamonds and precious gems are often used as collateral in shady deals and clandestine transactions. As we explore this rarefied realm, we begin to realize that the Pink Panthers' heists may have been merely the tip of the iceberg, a symptom of a far larger problem, in which corrupt dealers, smugglers, and money launderers have infiltrated the highest echelons of the jewelry trade. This has significant implications for our understanding of the Pink Panthers' place within the global crime landscape, and raises uncomfortable questions about the extent to which legitimate businesses may have been complicit in, or even profited from, their activities. But what's even more disturbing is the fact that some of the Pink Panthers' most high-profile targets were actually owned by individuals with questionable connections to the world of organized crime. As we follow the trail of clues and connections, we find ourselves drawn into a labyrinthine world of shell companies, offshore accounts, and clandestine meetings. The Pink Panthers' ability to navigate this complex landscape with ease has led some to speculate about potential ties to corrupt government officials or even intelligence agencies. While these claims are still largely speculative, one thing is certain: the Pink Panthers' story has become inextricably linked to a far broader narrative, one that encompasses not just the world of high-stakes crime, but also the hidden mechanisms of global power and corruption. And yet, despite the many twists and turns in this saga, there remains a nagging sense that we are still only scratching the surface, that the Pink Panthers' true significance extends far beyond their headline-grabbing heists. and into a darker, more mysterious realm that remains waiting to be explored. The Pink Panthers' impact on the world of law enforcement has been profound, with many agencies re-examining their strategies and tactics in light of the group's successes. But as we analyze the various responses to the Pink Panthers' activities, we begin to notice a disturbing trend, a trend towards increased surveillance, more aggressive policing, and a growing willingness to blur the lines between legitimate investigation and outright entrapment. This raises important questions about the balance between public safety and individual freedom, and highlights the need for a nuanced, informed discussion about the role of law enforcement in modern society. And yet, even as we grapple with these weighty issues, we are reminded that the Pink Panthers story is ultimately a human one, a story of flawed, complex individuals, driven by a mix of motivations and desires that continue to fascinate and intrigue us. As we continue to unravel the tangled threads of the Pink Panthers narrative, we are confronted with a dizzying array of characters, each with their own secrets and contradictions. There's the enigmatic leader, rumored to have masterminded some of the group's most daring heists, yet who remains shrouded in mystery. There's the charismatic thief, known for his charm and sophistication, yet who is also suspected of being involved in some of the group's more violent activities. And then there's the mysterious informant, who seems to have played a crucial role in the Pink Panthers' downfall, yet whose true identity and motivations remain unclear. As we navigate this complex cast of characters, we begin to realize that the Pink Panthers' story is not just a tale of crime and detection, but also a nuanced exploration of human psychology and behavior. The Pink Panthers' legacy continues to captivate audiences around the world, with their daring heists and charismatic personalities inspiring countless books, films, and documentaries. But as we delve deeper into the group's history, we begin to notice a fascinating paradox. Despite their reputation as larger-than-life figures, the Pink Panthers were ultimately a relatively small, tight-knit group, bound together by a shared sense of purpose and loyalty. This raises important questions about the nature of group dynamics and the ways in which individual personalities and motivations can shape the course of collective action. And yet, even as we explore these abstract themes, we are reminded that the Pink Panthers' story is ultimately a very concrete, very human one, a story of flesh and blood individuals, with all their strengths, weaknesses, and contradictions. As we near the end of our journey into the world of the Pink Panthers, we are left with a haunting sense of uncertainty, a sense that, despite all we have learned, there is still so much that remains hidden, so much that continues to evade our understanding. The Pink Panthers' story is a reminder that, in the world of high-stakes crime, nothing is ever as it seems, and that the truth is always more complex, more nuanced, and more multifaceted than we can ever fully comprehend. And yet, even in the face of this uncertainty, we are drawn back to the Pink Panthers again and again. Like moths to a flame, for in their story, we see reflected our own deepest fears, our own darkest desires, and our own most profound fascination with the unknown. But that wasn't the strangest part. As we finally begin to piece together the fragments of the Pink Panthers' narrative, we realize that their story is not just a relic of the past, but a harbinger of a far more uncertain and far more fascinating future.